India had a set of labor or employment laws many years before independence. After independence, too many laws were enacted. Several of the most important equal employment opportunity laws became law in the period from 1964 to 1991. Equal employment law continues to evolve with important new legislation being enacted since 1990 to 1991. The Civil Rights Act of 1991 reversed the effects of several Supreme Court rulings under the scoring that the burden of proof is the employer's once a plaintiff establishes possible illegal discrimination. The Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits employment discrimination against qualified disabled individuals. It also says employers must make reasonable accommodations for physical or mental limitations unless doing so imposes an undue hardship on the business. Basically, sexual harassment refers to unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature that takes place. For instance, when such conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly a term or condition of an individual's employment. Three main ways to prove sexual harassment include quid pro quo, hostile environment created by supervisors, and hostile environment created by co-workers who are not employers. Employers use various defenses against discrimination allegations. In defending themselves against discrimination allegations, employers need to distinguish between disparate treatment, intentional discrimination, and disparate impact, a policy that has an adverse impact regardless of the intent. The central role of adverse impact, showing that one of the employer's employment practices or policies has an adverse impact, therefore plays a central role in discriminatory practice allegations. A person who believes that he or she was a victim for unintentional discrimination because of an employer's practice need only to establish a prima facie case of discrimination. This means showing, for instance, that the employer's selection procedures did have an adverse impact on the protected minority group. For example, if a minority applicant feels he or she was a victim of discrimination, the person need only show that the employer's selection process resulted in an adverse impact on his or her group. Then the burden of proof shifts to the employer. It becomes the employer's task to prove that it's a valid predictor of performance on the job. In practice, an applicant or employee can use one of the following five methods to show that one of an employer procedure has an adverse effect on a protected group. The disparate rejection rate method compares the rejection rates for a minority group and another group. US federal agencies use a 4 by 5th rules to assess disparation rejection rates. A selection rate for any racial, ethnic, or sex group which is less than 4/5 to or 80% of the rate for the group with the highest rate will generally be regarded as evidence of adverse impact, while a greater than 4/5 rate will generally not be regarded as evidence of adverse impact. 4/5 of the 60% male hiring rate would be 48% because the female hiring rate of 30% is lesser than 48%. Adverse impact exists as far as these federal agencies are concerned. Similarly, the counts have used a standard deviation rule to confirm adverse impact. It is a measure of the dispersion of a set of data from its mean. Suppose we calculate the average height of students in your management class in simple terms. The standard deviation helps to describe, among other things, how wide a range there is in height between the shortest and the tallest students. In selection, the standard deviation rule holds that, as a rule of the thumb, the difference between the number of minority candidates we would have expected to hire and whom we actually hired should be less than 2 standard deviations. Restricted policy approach means demonstrating that the employer's policy intentionally or unintentionally excluded members of a protected group. Here the problem is such as policies against hiring guard less than 6 feet tall. Evidence of restricted policies such as these is enough to prove adverse impact and to expose an employer to litigation. The population comparisons approach compares the percentile of minority protected group and other workers in the organization with the percentage of corresponding group in the labor market. Employers use workforce analysis to analyze the data regarding the firm's use of protected versus non-protected employees in various job classifications. The process of comparing the percentage of minority employees in a job at the company with the number of similarly trained minority employees available in the relevant labor market is utilization analysis. Males no longer dominate the labor force. In India, the younger population below 35 years of age form the majority of the workforce. Also, more women are entering the professional domain. Women and other categories will account for most labor force within the near future. Employers today, therefore, often strive for diversity not just because the law says they must, but due to self-interest. Diversity means being diverse or varied, and the work means having a workforce comprised of two or more groups of employees with various racial, ethnic, gender, cultural, national origin, handicap, age, and religious backgrounds. Diversity management and address it is in future through the books. Potential threats to diversity could be stereotyping, discrimination, tokenism. Tokenism means a company appoints a small group of women, others, to high profile positions rather than more aggressively seeking full representation for that group. Ethnocentrism is a tendency to view members of other social groups less favorably than one's own. Thus, in one study, the US managers attributed the performance of some minorities less to their abilities and more to help they received from others. The same manager attributed the performance of non minorities to their own abilities. Discrimination against women goes beyond glass ceilings. Working women also confront gender role stereotypes, the tendency to associate women with certain jobs. The key to deriving benefits is properly managing these potential problems. In one study, researchers examined the diversity climate in 654 stores of a large US retail chain. They defined diversity climate as the extent to which employees in the store said the firm promotes equal opportunity and inclusion. They found the highest sales growth in stores with the highest pro-diversity climate and the lowest in stores where subordinates and managers reported less hospitable diversity climates. Another study found racial discrimination to be related negatively to employee commitment, although organizational efforts to support diversity reduced such negative effects. Diversity can actually drive higher profits. For example, more than 50% of the large companies, including GE, Microsoft, and Walmart, recently filed briefs with the US Supreme Court arguing that affirmative action produces increased sales and profits. Thus, when Merck needed halal certification for one of its medicines, it turned to its Muslim employees. They helped Merck bring the product to the market faster and helped ensure its acceptance among Muslims. Managing diversity means maximizing diversity potential's benefits while minimizing the potential problems such as prejudice that can undermine the cooperation. In practice, diversity management involves both compulsory and voluntary actions. However, compulsory actions can't guarantee cooperation. Managing diversity, therefore, usually relies on taking steps to encourage employees to work together productively. Typically, this starts at the top. The employer institutes a diversity management program. A main aim is to make employees more sensitive to and better able to adapt to individual cultural differences. Five sets of voluntary organizational activities often constitute such company-wide diversity management programs, providing strong leadership. Companies with exemplary reputations in managing diversity typically have CEOs who champion the cause of diversity. Leadership means becoming a role model for the behaviors required for the change. Assessing the situation, one study found that most common tools for assessing a company's diversity include using employment hiring and retention metrics, employee attitude surveys, management and employee evaluations, and focus group. The most common starting point of a diversity management effort is usually some type of employee education program. Combine education programs with the other non-concrete steps aimed at changing organizations' culture and management systems. For example, change the performance appraisal procedure to appraise supervisors based partly on their success in reducing intergroup conflicts. evaluate the diversity management program with improvement in employees' attitude towards diversity. In public sector and government departments, special cells are established for facilitating matters related to socially and economically deprived groups. In PSUs, the cell is generally a part of the HR department. Reverse discrimination means discriminating against non minority applicants and employees. While such situations may not be raised formally, instances of reverse discrimination can lead to discontent and even lawsuits.